Oi, sanje, chedan, soje, chonam, lai, chancho, bardo, dane, gyab, zenje, age, chinso, yebe, sonam, ye, dola, benjen, sanje, do, barasho, sanje, chedan, soje, sonam, la, chancho, bardo, dane, gyab, zenje, age, chinso, yebe, sonam, ye, Lola benje sanje do bara cho e sanje che dan che ye zonam lo e chancho bardo dane gyab zenje Agye chenzo ye be zonam ye Lola benje sanje do bara cho e simchen tamche dewa dan deve gyo dan den bara simchen tamche dongal dan dongal ge gyo dan dawar gyo Simje tamje zongala mebe dewa dan minda waran yuji. Simje tamje nirin cha dan nidan ra. Dan nyom la ne baran yuru chi. Simje tamje dewa dan dewe gyu dan den baran yuji. Simje tamje zongal dan zongal gi gyu dan ra waran yuji. Simje tamje zongal mebe dewa dan minda waran yuji. Simchen tamche nyirin chata nyidan ra Tai nyom la ne baran yu ru ji Simchen tamche dewa dan dewe gyu dan den baran yu Simchen tamche dungal dan dungal gi gyu dan ra waran yu ji Simchen tamche dungal mebe dewa dan me da waran yu Simchen tamche nyirin chata nyidan ra Tai nyom la ne baran yu Yeah. Oi, the Jibu, you, me, and do, re, ram, li, de, gen, boy, di. Sai ge jin do ne de bo ye do gun nan dai jin la je bar jo yi dai guru ren amandala ga ne andarya me in English. Enlightenment, I'll take refuge in the Buddha that I and sound by the liquidity in this practice. Sentient beings from now until enlightenment. I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and by the merit practice in this practice, may I attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. From now until my enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and by the merit in this practice, may I attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings enjoy goodness and causes. May all sentient beings be free from pain and causes. May all sentient beings never be spared from joyful lives. May all sentient beings belong to the equanimity, free of vice, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings enjoy peace and in causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and causes. May all sentient beings be never separate from Christ. May all sentient beings enjoy equanimity. Yeah. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness and causes. May all sentient beings from suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never separate from joyfulness. May all sentient beings be free from attachment. Knowing that we perfume strewn with flowers, smartly encircled by the four continents, surrounded by the sun and moon, I rejoice this briefly and afraid. And all living beings enjoy the pure and
정말 니본데레.
So good afternoon to you all.
다 가상조 딜레디와 로리텔라 다 로리데 로리 듄데 당보거나 지단에 로리 듄거나 도도 쉬어야지라.
Mm.
당보 다 로리 듄게 고림도 세나 단다 디간라다 데디스도 좀 쉐바 제시 데디체네 파림치다 다디 단다 파림네 다치 고림도 되나 치 고림도 쇼디 데레텔라네 쇼 네바도 단데 에사마레 손당 마다 아까지도 다 단다 고림데 에네치 토멘도스 에나레 야두도스 에나다 치 데디 고림도시 레샤 테네 다 칸사치기 귤레케 케베림바도 오체바이네 고림 카가 직다 고림도 양 담케마직 록셰도 록셰 테솜 데디지네 다직 타마타마도 오솜 데디 계획 기rim바도 고림 데디도 오시 수용은 도세 직슈나
Yes. 인지 될자고 이제는 배 마시면 Um, so last time we were talking about the ways of categorizing cognition, and the first category is sevenfold, cognition, and we will do kind of brief explanation of this seven here, and the way this seven cognition is presented in our book, page 47. The order, the order and the sequence, there's no definite kind of sequence. Sometimes it is presented in a different way, such as how these seven cognition arises within one's own mind. So based on that, there is a particular order, and such as beginning with the, sort of in the reverse order, distorted cognition, and then it will go all the way up to the number one, direct perception. And so first we will go through the simple or brief, the meaning of each of these.
다나진이 가상 딘만디도 치다 제라라이도시 가상 두어지 용도 다나진 딜라탄도 쪼도 치세오이나 단다 딜라 셴바치다니 칠라나도 포에망 로일라다 인디나 가리고 있는 단다 포에도 어디 단다 치디 가리삼도 땅고도 전에 단다 딜라니 셈 고란데 칠라 삼도 다나진 게니 티요아 땅오숨 로리든 다 로리든들라야 제레레라야 요 남당 망보지 차트 걸다 지단 직 정어지 정어는 제레레라야 망보여로 온딘지도 오지 삼도 다 단다 디캅수
And the we had this question last time, the universality, and the other term that was used in this book is generality, and that in this context, that can refer to the universality or generality as the mind itself. And when we go into each and this particular seven cognitions, then again seven cognition in each itself has a several kind of classification within each of those seven.
다치다니 딩안이 견수 단다디 로리든데 드라이드 트로세르데 치다니 로리든기 아니 찬이데 그냥 하고 와이나 딩에고야데 계시모도 이나 단당한 주디는 막 ngazun tu yundu ngazun pecho chayagi yani pet tende gane ta ngazun keja dishe was tanda tengde.
Um, so first of all, it is important to kind of, if you can, keep in mind the meaning or definition of each of these seven, since we went through one text, about cognition or awareness. And but for here, we will use kind of daily kind of experience based on daily experiences example, and you will use and then go through these seven meaning or understanding of these seven cognitions.
Re, 다 단다 루리 튼데 튀긴 동안 저기 지단에 시바기 내가 최대하다 다나진기다 배저 여여 바로 오지래 당한 저기 뒤단 뒤레세대 다직 레레체네 뭐 만지 말마도 다단다 디모숨도 오지 찾아와이나 단다 디난 코랑 랑한 저기 오포도 다단다 가리 통화 차상 단다 디간라 통기요디 차상한 저 급도 다직 가인 바도 저 라트도 중앙디 통화 다란데 이 모숨도 오지라니 직 단다 내가 딘데질라 삼로탄사나 티기도.
Yes.
응?
Um, these seven cognitions are something that that is very much part of our daily thought processes. It always these are always kind of functioning. Always we are always using these seven in our daily life, although we are not able to identify or aware of each and every seven cognitions. So beginning with the first one, translated as direct perception. Direct perception, for this moment, temporarily, you can understand direct perception as something that you are apprehending or seeing at this moment in this room right now. Whatever you see, perceive, these are all considered as a direct perceiving or direct perception.
어디지? 다 데네 셰발라 디sambal라 치다니 치 코큐르당 덴딜라니 균센당 따라 데네 토아이질라 에네 셰발라 오라 다디 데디 도지 다 치다네 다 단다 페도지 샤바이나 다 치로니 파졸라 따와이나 가 데나로 이게 미지 다 치로데라 모다 요디 그 미지 하고 와이나 다 무슨 미데 무슨지 모다 딜라타니 디낭라니 코요바니 균 뽑다 또 토바데 라인이 디지 라인이 자나디기도.
And second, inference or inferential cognition. Generally, inference or inferential cognition is a cognition which depends upon reason and sign, to understand the object. So the simple example would be somebody that and somebody his or her kind of vehicle. When you saw that vehicle parked outside, from that parking outside the vehicle, you can infer that that person is inside this room. So that cognition is the inferential cognition or inference.
어디래 다 디제 데니 제시라 디sambal라 다 단다디 ngela chik to yangju chi derijela labgirete 다 단다디 페도를 첨바이나 페til라 테네 똑바디 양 살미 바데 똑바디라 하고 와 텔라 테네 하고 와딜라 아니 제시를 오지 삼나타나 디기도 단다디 페딜라.
And third is subsequent cognition. Subsequent cognition, again, in general, is defined as cognition of something that is already cognized. So it means you have cognized it again. And if you use the previous example, the vehicle parked outside and person inside, and if you have the same kind of cognition arises again, that is considered as a subsequent cognition.
디 이쪽에 다 디레더라 이쪽에 zambal라 이쪽에 zambal라 다디 단다디니 Yosare samne tadi tand pe taram chilo la dishan tanda di peshana tikitudi. Di yosare samne lokor hinayang tindi yobar mange pashi.
Before this correct assumption, again, this cognition is if you use the same example, you kind of through inference you realize or you understood that person is inside because car is parked outside, and so the correct assumption is now here you are making assumption, that person assuming that the person is inside because of the car, but you have not gained certainty. There's no certainty in that. So that cognition is a correct assumption.
Dice te ta de nala da namla mange bala de nala mange ba de zambala ta chik yul mandawa ta chik ni thong do ji cha jana ta chik yul mandawa ni thong de chik de la pe sem shuk chumbo de zambala ta chik da ji meto gi meto do ji la ta yo ka sun ta ni chik te ba de ni pe ja wa na meto de la pe lo shuk chumbo che de zambala ta ke jamba chi ke ta wa na te ni chik mago wa da ha mago wa de ni chung gro de de la ni na la mange ba na. Yes.
Indeterminate perception. Indeterminate perception. This happens with the, when we use it, happens with the, when you have a two object of apprehension, when you're looking simultaneously, two object of apprehension. For example, eyes looking at the flower, beautiful flower. At the same time, you are hearing sound, somebody's calling you. At that moment, because of your kind of intense kind of interest or focus on the object that you are, looking at, the flower, because of that intensity, the hearing becomes kind of indeterminate. So it doesn't kind of, what is translation again? Indeterminate. You are not aware, and you don't. That doesn't, the hearing part doesn't keep in your wasn't able to kind of stay, in your mind. So in that circumstances,
So in
that circumstances, listening, to that sound, if somebody's calling you, that consciousness of listening becomes indeterminate perception or cognition.
어디지 나라망에 빠졌던 태좀 세대 삼발라다 즉 뭐고 그 컨디션 바이나 다직 디 이나 미나 삼벨 로니케 다 뭐고 칸다 카이나 베나 다직 디 봄바다 뭐다 뭐고다 미다 타바다 미다바나 왜 딘디시 타바레스 미다바레스 스메 로티니케와 케와텔라 카레 태솜세로
And number 6 is doubt. Doubt is, we said it earlier, kind of two-pointed mind. You are in between, in between making a decision. This is or this is not. So there's a two kind of pointed mind, and you can use many examples such as whether this object is permanent or impermanent. So yet to decide or two-pointed mind is generally kind of, meaning or defined as the doubt.
임바지 아니 마임바 타와다 이다 마임바지 임바타와 다치 매바지 요레세야 되나 요바지 매바 타와 딘디 타와지라 가서 록셰.
And then final one, number 7, is translated as a distorted cognition or mistaken cognition, is a perceiving or cognition of basically, in opposite manner, something that is perceived as something that isn't, or something that is in existence, perceiving that as a non-existence, or something that doesn't exist, you perceive that as a in existence. So basically, kind of that kind of view or that kind of perception or cognition.
어디래 다디 좀마다 디 로리 된데 다 시직 네 찍도 오실라야 다랑 찍 데데도 오체네야 페샤라도 다 데데도 다랑 차상 상화도 데데시 용거 어디 용거 페나 데데 땅에 디시 페나 캄바도 땅아주 데왈라이 디피시시가 메다야단 데데도 요라다 데데도시 페샤바이나 캄바데나라 도건 도와용 사이트 좀 도와텔라 테니 캄바데나라 메 도와텔라 테니 캄바데나라 메다로 만 디치네 다오토시 파 유샤나데 도와텔라 테니 메 요바하고라 메 요사마레 삼바데 카레잖아 록셰 어디 지지 되네 메텔라 테네 캄바텔 도와 용고레 캄바데나라 메요다 메냐베 로케와 팔체 요사마레 팔체 요 냠바디 다 딘지 태som 지지가 지자네 다디 쇼이나 다나지 메텔라 텔라 텔라 메 요사레 타지도 요 삼바다 테노로들 메요 삼바다 이니 요 버망에 바티카리 이체
Yes.
텔라 도와 텔라 테네 텔라 메요 버망에 도와 텔라 테네 메 도와 컴베 토게 도와 텔라 테네 컴바데 나로라 메요 버망에 바티 셰바 데네 텐데 로데니 로케지니 바데 니 제시 데네 단다 페데니 메네 다 찍는 나로라 토나레 나로 메니 모숨도 통하데 아니 모숨
Yes.
데네 메살로 나나야 메니 망해바데 니 카리 디 아니 나나 망해바
Yes.
오데데 시질라자니 데데 시식슈
If we use an example of one particular object and how these seven cognition arises, we can use the example of perceiving or seeing or knowing of fire in the home, which has on the roof, smoke coming out. So looking at that house from the outside, although you are seeing kind of smoke coming out from that home, but then you kind of sort of come to the conclusion that there's no fire in that. That would be distortion, mistaken, and then the next would be, if you come to the kind of doubt, is there really fire in or not? That would be, doubt. And then you make a kind of, sort of assumption here. There must be fire there, but you are not certain about it. You don't gain a certainty. That would be correct assumption. And then you use that smoke as a reason for the evidence of the existence of fire. That would be inferential. You are using that smoke to infer, the fire in the home. And the second moment of that inferential would be subsequent cognition, the same consciousness or same cognition. And then you kind of walk inside that home and you saw the fire in front of you. That would be direct perception. And seeing the fire, and again, if you are kind of indeterminate, haven't yet, then that would be indeterminate perception. So that would be the example using one kind of, same object of the observation for how this seven perception or seven cognition arises in one individual.
어디 나신기 땅은 그냥 최신다 잘라야 다른 리더체니 다른 데니 도치니 다치 뒤균도 데라야 전환다 데리 요에네 데리치니 다치 가리 칸데 가리레샤 다치 lori tu yina ne on so so yeni chik ta che na degrees.
Yes. So using that as in kind of basis or foundation, you can apply that observation to any object that you interact in your daily life, how these seven or any of these cognition arises.
Je ta tanda odi ta didi ni lori tuen lori de ki pesen dedis ta dindi jere ta dinima ta lori de la tanda di dundu yewa ene ta tanda sumdu yewa da nisu yewa dendi to ta sumdu yewa de la ene chi tokpa la ni do tokpa chi da tome chi da tokpa tome ene truche sum toda pena toba de la de tanda tunji sunyu do chebe toba ta rangchen sunyu do tunji sunyu do chebe toba ze de chik do rangchen sunyu do chebe tome ene meba sana chen sunyu do chebe tome tuche ze toba da tome tuchi sum de yawa chiki tarang yawa chiki yore se ta dina tepna yawa na jin de yore se tichi shi da
Niwa de har sang gishila. Ngi sum mara niwa de.
아
Tanda di nima peche dinal du. Tanda di nal pe ma shukyo mendo. Nima peche dinal ina dinal tanda di nganzu nima ta sujo shorwa. Dinal ina tangpo di tokpa che niwa di ngi sum je sumwe de tokme dan jarshin de yulan. Di tanda dinal pe ma shi mendo.
로리 숨도 여와들.
Lori sum de yuwa
간데 도세.
당보다 똑바 찍고지 니와 등의 숨 찍고지 숨보다 도면 찍고지 먼저다 쟁교 용말에 되게 되게 지금 it's called 조용히 소리 오지 그 무슨 게시가 다 게시가 송에도 송시다 니와 갈라면 게시가 당보다 똑바시 니와 등의 숨 라면 게시가
디간라 배차디는 어딘데 디간라 디도 인지나라 간
인지나 비례 지고 되는 가사디 이게 람
이하다 디레다 숨도 여와데 똑바체 도메체 근데 투치 숨데
똑바체 동메체 추시
숨데 여와 숨도 여와데 디레
동메체 숨보다 추시 라면 심보드나 대숨 대체셔 숨 맞아 강아지 봐줘들 네 단대 계셔야 되죠
바이나 다 만다와 되는 아직 집에 손당다 되는 바베 안 되는 저 우측 장당다 되는 개발이서 어디
So we went briefly through this, seven cognition using example. The next is again the division of the cognition. There's a threefold division, and then there is a twofold division. The threefold division in simple, if you use one word for each of these, the first one would be, conceptual thought. Second would be non-conceptual thought, and third would be mistaken cognition. And in your book, it is presented in more kind of longer version or maybe more complicated. At the end of page 47, threefold division of mind consists of conceptual consciousness, which has a universal as its observed object. And the second is unmistaken non-conceptual consciousness, which has a unique particular as its observed object. And then third is mistaken non-conceptual consciousness, which has a clear appearance of a non-existent as its observed object. The example of these are, in the first case, conceptual consciousness perceiving a pot. In the second case, direct perception perceiving a form. In the third case, distorted non-conceptual consciousness, to which a snow mountain appears yellow. And the
어디
development.
단다 디간라 김솔레디 얘기되라 단다디 하고서 이제
So you're just asking,
단다디 솜데
did you get what these three are?
페나 단다디 페 다디간라 니야다 든지 똑바라이데 고단
정보.
똑바라이게 페들 봄진 똑바진 페샤도 봄진 똑바세 데zambal라 수술로라 칸디도 실게나 근데 페나 먼저 페나 봄바 통요와이나 다 봄바이나 다 봄바 마지 페마지 아마 소소소소기 아마 파마도 연나르메나 지단에 파마겐 넘버 2지 직 삼로 타인데 zam바 직 파마 덴데 지여서 차례죠로 로 온데도 오실때 직 든지 데 아마지 든지 셔로 도바 덴데도 오시 차례나
So here,
봄진 똑바라니 페신 pen 로샤샤도
example of the first one, conceptual consciousness perceiving a pot. So the word here, conceptual, actually was asking when it says a conceptual consciousness perceiving a pot, what does that, how is your understanding of this kind of expression? And if you use another example, use, say, conceptual consciousness perceiving your parents. If you use that in your parents, then you have an image of your parents in your mind. And that is what is meant by conceptual consciousness perceiving your parents, the images in your mind.
어디는 다나지 덴데도 가르카 소소 딩갈라 가르도 또바이나 단당아도 딩갈라 데데요 데실라 나라토네 디기 딘 가족이 누구한테 삼로당하네 디에니 또발라 차려용하데 데로 데다디 누구한테 던진 집에는 또바
So at this moment, whatever that you have seen earlier before coming to this room, whatever the images that you have, earlier perception becomes conceptual thought at this moment. And when you go back to your home later, the images that you have seen here in your mind at your home later becomes the conceptual consciousness or meaning generality or universality.
원데네지라 삼로당나디기도 단다디 방법 니바데 랑젠수도 제베 또 도메 마출이 셰바제데 잠발라 다니 수 짐빙 타고제데 잠발라 다지 가레 당아저 가레 통 무슨도 통하여 바디 데코란 짐바 다랑 레다다나 오보도지 다단다디가 딘디도 직 승긴볼도 스페샤샤나 되기도 디 통화 다랑 기디 마불 또바데 단다 딩엔데라니 또바데라니 직 던지도 차르고라 던지도 지가 마차로 갑두거나 다란 딘데 또 통화데라니 다직 또바메 베토니 또메게니 자 또메 마트레 셰바스 또 데리시나 먼저 것으로
The example of the second one, is says direct perception perceiving a form. So that would be, if you use an example of looking at this, singing bowl, direct perception, meaning there is no, the word here is, there is no universal or there is no generality image in your mind between, this singing bowl and your mind. You are seeing it directly. Unlike the earlier case where we are talking about, you have an image in your mind. Through that image, in your mind, then you are kind of getting or understanding, the object. So in here, the direct perception, there is nothing in between your consciousness and the singing bowl. You are seeing it directly. So that's why it's direct perception. Somebody, you would.
또메 출시에서 잠발라 다디 단다디도 텔라이니 직 출발했다 마임바신 짐바 메바사나 젠도 소용도 제 메바지
somebody
메바지 요버스 지하나 어디 메바지 요버 짐베니 직 또바도 계시 또 메바지 요버 짐바디 메 짐바 덴디실라이니 또메 출시에서 de pe taran di taran jashana di kari sebo na tome loshes kari tanda di kari di sebo maro sebo di kande sinangor zene ta chik loba pe na ngaju ina la chine tanda ne chiki yang de thongre se to ti kari sene ta pagi use the meva line de se chibate.
And the third one, although it says unmistaken non-conceptual consciousness, which is a unique particular as its mistaken non-conceptual consciousness, which has a clear appearance of non-existence as its observed object. Basically, you have an appearance of something that doesn't exist. Okay, so that's and the example here would be snow mountain appearing kind of yellow. Yellow mountain doesn't exist, you know, and snow mountains are wide, but what appear to you is a kind of yellow mountain, and it is because of in the text it says because of such as jaundice. If you have a jaundice, white appears to be yellowish. So in the third case, something appears in your mind actually that doesn't exist. So that would be both mistaken as well as distortion as well.
Oh dear. Tachidan tanda di chabin dinang la tarang salte to chidan ne tachik takkecha dende chöyong de sambala dilaya totagi lukta mangpo chi yonggo pe tanda di so ene sonyo ke kone ene dodebe lu yen se de sungi desha de tanda dodebe lukta uche.
So there are different interpretation by different philosophical schools, and that's why you see here what was presented earlier. Threefold division is made from the point of view of the observed object and represents principally Sautantika viewpoint, Sutra school. Sutra school's viewpoint, not all Buddhist philosophical schools.
어디제 다 단다 디에니 로리 텔라니 숨도 여와데 다 딘도 여와다 숨도 여와데 로제 다 로리 니수 여와데라 만다와니 카딘도 단다 딘마
투르
카투 ene wansheda yeshe toba tome chama semin ene tuche mayenda seju da tuju semda semjung che di chi da yawa chidani ta digan la chidani ta dila chi lori tan di yawa da mambo shiu de ngeya da khabo de chi chajang nge ko de khabo de digan la yogyo gi da chi dyendang sumdang da di semba de zo soso chi injina la yemba na di ming de soso nge tu ba na yago do.
And after giving kind of simple and brief sort of intro to the first, group of 7, consciousness and then cognition, and then next threefold cognition, and then third is twofold. Now the twofold has 6 sets of twofolds, and so it begins with the sense consciousness versus mental consciousness, conceptual versus non-conceptual, valid versus non-valid, mistaken versus unmistaken, those that engage via exclusion versus those that engage via affirmation, and then 6th is the mind and mental factors. So although there are many kind of ways of categorization, but it would be helpful if you keep in your mind kind of the grouping, 7, then 3, and then 2, and the 2 has 6 sets.
Just tanda disu chidani di re la pe dan dene so de wala shu yong du dina tanda diga la dordi kurang tu digi gunzen ro chi diga la yang sung do ta na jin di pena tangbo di dagi ombo sujen pa la ten ko mi ko ji ko ne lo wan lo dan yilo ni sha si do dagi ombo digi ne 저 율라테네 유 되게네 유 데카레 체마체라 텐 ombo sujen bala ten koba bala ten koba de ene wanlo tang ten migo ba de ilo tende shishage sarne odi chi.
And then next comes briefly why these 2 sets of 6 ways of divisions, twofold divisions. And so, the reasons are in your book on page 48. The twofold division of sense consciousness versus mental consciousness is made from the perspective of whether the relevant cognition needs to be based on physical sense faculty as its dominant condition. So the word here is dominant condition, physical sense faculty, dominant condition, whether there is a dominant condition of physical sense or not. If there is, physical sense of dominant condition, that would be sensory consciousness or sensory consciousness. And if there is no such basis of dominant condition, that would be mental consciousness.
어디지? 다 똑바다 또 매라야 돼. 다 자당 된지 나와 요매세서 요매기고네 네 똑바다 또 매니지스. 다 디조 군주 킹게는 자당 된전 자당 지단이 달라도 뭐 지단이 직삼지 된세도 뭐 디기 된다. 디기 나와 되니 나와 요바다 매바 나와 요바데 나와 요바데 똑바다 나와 매바데 네 또매센데 디니 시작도 돼.
Second, the twofold division of conceptual consciousness versus non-conceptual consciousness is made from the perspective of whether a linguistic referent appears in that cognition. Linguistic referent. So linguistic referent, in Tibetan, there is two words, da and tön. Da is the, linguistic referent, and tön is the generic image. So appearance that you have in your mind can have from simply kind of sound or I guess linguistic, not sure that's the exact word, based on some kind of sound or verbal kind of, expression, you have image in your mind. Then there's another, which is based on the meaning of that object, you have another appearance in your mind. So based on that kind of, appearance, if there is an appearance, it's a conceptual. If there is no appearance, that becomes non-conceptual.
어디지? 다네 율라 루밀로 율라 루밀로 sabto 이민기 고네 세마다 세민 다단다디 세마다 세민 경우는 이샤와데 율루와나 밀루암 sabto 이민기 고네 이 샤그레스기도 다 치타니 루스나 당아주 치타니 고고르 당와서 저기 딘딜라 고고레 지데 밀루와스나 따치 고고르 마다와 따따니 치 밀루와데 치야 원에 임바다 루와데 니 주마 딘딜실라 고고레 되게네 데네 치 데네 sabdo toba 임바데 니 세마다 sabdo toba 마임바데 니 세마 마임바
다른 식으로 루어도 세마만 받은 루어
네,
때마다.
다디 kunci taranti kogiena tandi.
The third, valid and valid versus non-valid consciousness. And division of valid consciousness versus non-valid consciousness is made from the perspective of whether cognition is, there's two things here, newly realizing or is deceptive or non-deceptive. So if it is newly realizing, first time realizing, it's a valid. That's a one way. And the second one is whether it is a deceptive or not. If it is a deceptive, it is non-valid. If it is non-deceptive, it's a valid. So deceptive meaning, we can say, not true. Non-deceptive is reality or the truth.
다다 디실라 에네타 디차서 나 알터 텔라 네 미네지 에네 툴로아다 마툴레 셰바니 니제 다발레타 툴로아다 마툴레 셰바니 나 알터 텔라 네 미네세데 잠발라 지단에 당아서 남바상게 베선데 최던제 다 메바레스 다메레스 잠발라 당아서 다 딘데시 통연데 잠발라 안지 직 예바도다 덴버 투바도 징고라 Tempo Trubati 다 동무즈 추제 템바 마두 봐라 이쪽으로 지단이 최단적
And
또 번쯤 봤던 어디
the next twofold division, mistaken versus unmistaken cognition. The twofold division of mistaken cognition versus unmistaken cognition is made from the perspective of whether the object of a cognition exists as it is perceived or not. So, if it is if object exists as it is perceived, that is unmistaken. So generally in Buddhism, we always talk about things doesn't exist, intrinsically or inherently or truly. But the way we apprehend is such that as if things exist, inherently, and that apprehension is apprehending things exist inherently or truly is a mistaken cognition, and it should be, in reality, the perception should be perception or understanding of realizations of, non inherent or non-intrinsic. Yeah, sure.
Conceptual perceptions always mistaken.
Yeah. That's it. Talk that in and talk that more like the talk by na tribo be cabaret load.
또 똑바이네 추바인베 차버도 저기서 말아 저 말아
Take you will chabura.
아 똑바 알아가 저 단다디에 디도 진 어디 지는 어디지
So in this context, so following the Sutra school, no, but that depends on this. But that depends on the school. If you ask that to the Madhyamika consequent school, conceptual consciousness must necessarily be a mistaken.
되네 다 단다디 디제 다가 라요라 차세서 치네 쭉 차세서 치네 쭉 민주계네 쭉 민주계원이 세주다 쭉 다 세주다 쭉 다 라요라 차세서 치네 살로 다 어디나라 간디 도시도 되네 다른 지시나 되게
사실 주민 기회세주도
차세서 치네 쭉바데 셀주래 차세서 마치는 쭉바데 존조지
그 똑바로 동안 배션을 내라서 보대도
어디 다른 도로
동매 배션은
노래
어제 남이 슈골직 빼빼 찬스 나고 도배 겁도 통고로 슈골 동맹 직 제점을 매도 망보긴 주도 매도 직 동조된 것이 되게 말어 근데 빼도 고대면서 So the next one is those that engage via exclusion versus that engage via affirmation. And the twofold division of this is made from perspective of whether a cognition engage its object by parsing its object into components and not. So I was suggesting, the easier way to understand would be if you use, these two equal to conceptual and non-conceptual. Using the example, I was suggesting this example might be kind of easy to understand. Exclusion meaning non-conceptual. The non-conceptual. Say if you are in the grocery store and if you look at the flower, you are looking at the all flower as if kind of taking a picture, like everything is right there. That's a non-conceptual way of perception. And then there's one particular flower that you want to buy it. It's really beautiful and that's what you like. And when you get back home later, and when you think about, I should have bought that flower. At that time, you don't have that whole flower clearly appears in your mind. It won't. Your mind is just selecting particular flower that you want to buy it. That is the example of, affirmation. So that's how mind kind of differentiate, and that's equal to kind of conceptual and non-conceptual. That might be easier to understand. There was that I was suggesting to Geshe, and he said, "Go ahead."
다마데 아니 샘단 샘중이 조고다 유지 뭐다 개발 유지 뭐 라인에 뭐다 개발라 조수기 원에 샘다 샘중니 니 중에 송바 조도세 때나 ngol che kebar to chebade ne semdang kebar line che zogor chebade ne semjung.
And finally, mind and mental factors. Those two, two sets. Mind and mental factors is made from the perspective of whether a given cognition is primary or secondary. And when the given cognition is primary, it's the mind, and when the given cognition is secondary, mental factors. Secondary, and whether it apprehends the entity itself or the specific attributes of the object. Based on these two, mind and mental factors are categorized.
온데니르세 단다 딩안라다 단다디 로로치티 차소이나 땅에 셰만에 다양의 데네마 티어도 좀라 종에 직 단다디마 통야다 급투리야다 덴딜라 직배게 잘 투야 라이닝 직 배딜라 상로당도 좀야 직상 망보지 땅고데 덴좀바야 온데리기 탑시 직인 스타딜 데네마가 조조가 좀 덴데데 네 덴데데 레 상상로 네 부야지 덴데 요알라 베스 쉐인스.
So that's a very kind of brief and simplified version of these classifications of the consciousness. And Geshe was saying that he's trying to kind of give you an example which is direct and something that is based on experience, our own experience, ordinary experience, and through that way it might be easy to kind of understand. And although the detailed explanations of each one will come later in the text. Yes, we'll take a break here.
So just should have a tea.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Could you give an example of number 6, mind and mental factors?
심다 심중기 빼지 샤로시는.
This one. 알레레레.
심중이만 저렇게 가지고 돌아니마. 뭐 이거 뭐.
네. 맞습니다. 심중. 네, 지금 쇼. 일단에 샘 왕봉한테 샘기 치지로. 와. 샘중 샘
조선의 심중업중하지 다 심중업중까지 가시는데.
샘중업중하지.
빼 샤로시들로 빼.
됐어. 인만 시셔.
유배쯤까지 개보다 개보 코르테까지 시작하고.
네.
개보 권한 심치는 개보 코르다 저게 심중치. 배직체 어디? 어디 참마 어디 참마 좀 참마게 킬링 직모로.
단다 어디 이게 로컬한 직장에 직시해 되지.
로컬한 계시.
어디도 주 주시는. 어디도 직시해.
Mind and mental factors. This is a whole another kind of book. We studied this before, right? So the one, kind of common simple example, which doesn't necessarily interpreted or accepted by all school of thoughts, but primary mind would be like a king, and the mental factors would the king's kind of, consorts like ministers, that would be one kind of example in a very kind of simple way. That would be one example.
So we're an example of if you get in a car wreck, and that's the primary thing, and then afterwards it's anger, fear, whatever.
Well, seems you more better out the young more better more 답변 중순으로 more 답네 아니 답에 갑라 다가로래 조심 도chen 답 사와다니 신하는 가르기 심중 샤나리로 된데란다 칼로데
내가 말해 단다 디간라
근데 나방아서 고로
레레레 어딜라 레 망보셔 진딜라 망보시가 담도 도단다 bomba shagido bomba samri badi ni semba ki kebar to kijo do ribadi so ni semju
요새 샤나리로
ati anti pe semba jila jana di
the example that you gave would be, because you were saying, would be a little complicated. Because, because when we are later talking about 51 mental factors, there are 5 omnipresent mental factors. So there are 5 mental factors that exist all the time with the primary mind. So that means, you can have like a primary consciousness functioning at the car wreck and then later fear and totally separate. You can't have that. There's a kind of simultaneity. But the another example Geshe was using was, again, a typical example when you're looking at the, say, pot. Merely perceiving a pot, this is a pot, that is done by primary mind. Mind itself. And then particulars on that pot, shape, color, size, those were done by the mental factors.
Perfect, thank you.
이니만 건조 뒤에도 가가지 이거 셈셈 주고 자산티 뭐요 말이네.
지단 어디라단다 모델 콜라된 셈델라이나 셈중 어디 요래
심중업 중 아니네 진짜 자다 가진지 보도.
어딘지 요 셈델라 요 뭐요.
And the last one again, Geshe was saying that as compared to the previous, most extensive primary mind. Then when we talk about mental factors, then depending on the different schools of philosophy, it varies from 52 mental factors to all kind of 100 something mental factors. So there are many different mental factors that kind of sort of accompanies primary mind or functions with the primary mind. So it's an extensive topic.
지단에 디와란도
Yes. Yes.
Written for the Satontra.
So you're saying that more detail, we have this in the book, the 50 different mental factors. It will come 52 or that's all the role of the Moran.
다디 단다 깝깝라이네 카살네 디니 도데비 루레 디레레스네 중용도 디레 지단에 단다 로리디 나참 로리 남자 진짜네 단다 지 망케 디 셈셈비 루도가나 도고 말해 도데발레 무슨 투모 아이 남들 단데 좀 망보시 시탄데 좀발라 디레
도데발 망지.
도데발 어디 지티진
the main school that interprets Buddhist philosophy or types of consciousness is based on, we have one here mentioned, Sotantrika Sutra school. Then there is also mindfulness school. So mainly based on the Sutra school's interpretations, and many are equally accepted by all schools of thought. But there are some differences. Some are not accepted by like middle way consequent schools. The interpretations of like Temado, healing or
tsema dizu tsemba la khura tuta khaga yore ina ta digi sidan chi chane tuta gi ne tsengi de hago ina de desi di 또 두다시기 산이다 어디 유럽 하고는 딘디실라니 디카와이면 디스 고야라 야고요 그래서
So, yeah, on the other hand, kind of, if you have some understanding of the, assertions of the four school of thoughts and their kind of, interpretation, then that would help when you look at this. But generally, mostly, these are based on the Sutra school's interpretations. Any other questions?
I guess why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, why is it the Tantric view that is primarily we look at for this?
가르치는 게 이제 가르치는 제일로도 도대체 루조시네.
단디 믹스 기타 딜라 디레스 디지 주다 스케 마르데 단다 디게 남샤도 오데 만 따라
참말.
체마 이도 좀발레 체마 이도 좀 바디 이레스 네 지단에 따치 체마다 퍼진다 오마바이는 오마데스다 네 제테는 제라마와다 도와드잖아요 다른 제라마 저 주카가도 오데 용그라 어디 요래서는
So you're saying because of the the actual subject which is the base of this all interpretation for all of this the mainly this origin or source text would be what's called pramana, right? Pramana, tema in Tibetan, which is very much based on the Sutra school's interpretations. And likewise, when we look at the five major subjects, perfection of wisdom, it has its own base of school, primary school that interprets that subject. Likewise, Vinaya tradition has primary school that interprets. So follows the primary kind of school that interprets extensively, considered as that is the most, I guess, more reliable.
So with this, knowledge of these things, and as we begin to understand them, how might we apply that to our practice? What benefits might we see from it, as well as throughout daily life?
근데 저거야보다 대대 고랑 대대 장교되게 아니 고랑주 나베슈 냠내 칭해지 메지는 냠내 칭을 간디스 편도 고래로도 편도 되는 거 님만님에게 나올로 고삼당들 저거 가려로도
다디 다단다디 페나가 저 단다지 가레데지 페나가 저 곰게디 삼발라 저 가레 공부리 먼저 셈 공부라 즉 셈에니 즉 뜻이도 네버데 공부라 셈 네지도 공부이도 삼발라 셈기에니 즉 콜라도다 셈기티 콜라 젤레도다 나바도다 근데 가지치기 학교인데 대체기에는 냠용체그라 배 찾아와이나 단다 기랑조 도시바이나 디 인디아나나 데니 로망부터 인디아나 디기 이게 결사디 가왈라 도와이나 도초그리 삭삭삭 그것도 배낭아에는 디나 서버로 이나게 디 경아요 말데 디텐 테스트 티보로 텔 테스트 투그르마도 양 파트나 지야만 몽부실레 텐니마도 용도 말아 데페 테나진라 단다 덴데지 하고 와다 덴데 제와 텔라테니 소소지 직 다치 로지치도 메바이나데 제곰도 조금 간데지 나와이나 덴데라 펜도 덴데 용게 다치 모슈기 숨기 거네 다양직 갑도 단다마요 와이나 직 제라요 하나 덴데로 소비 덴데요 덴데 용게 해서
For practitioners, in Buddhism, what we do as a practitioner mainly is the practice of meditation, concentration. And when we do, say, single-pointed meditation, what we are using is our mind. And mind is the one that does the concentration, all the practices. So therefore, the more you know about the mind, the more, you can have, say, sophisticated practices, So it depends on your kind of knowledge of the nature of the mind itself, such as the function of the mind, the different aspects of the mind, types of the mind. The more you know about the mind, the more you gain experience. Through that experience, your practice becomes more efficient. And, when we talk about meditation, such as, whether it's an analytical meditation or whether it's a meditation of shamatha, the place single-pointed meditation, there is a direct, immediate, as well as indirect daily life kind of experiences. Everything, has to do with the mind, and therefore so Geshe was using a simple example, you guys being residents of Indianapolis for a long time. If you want to go anywhere in the part of city, you can go easily. You are so familiar with the place, you have good knowledge. On the other hand, Geshe-la, he has to rely on somebody else to go to maybe next, so the more you know about the mind, the more your practice becomes productive and efficient.
배든지 도저 지단에 당한저 단다디 eng한저 지단에 되긴 동안저 최 년바이나데 셰바이나데 다나 진정한 저기 제게저 최종 가데 되지 제와이나 donda ningbo do de so chu le to de kar zin nga chu sem de chue sem de chue se de zama nang be chue se de zama sem de la chue chue da re chue chue se de zama la ta khani chue chue da re zana ta chik mai ba ji yim be chola de da chik lok ba ji lok pa da nge ba la so ba de ya be chola samlo ta ya da te chola che go de ke chim bo re da dor de na nga chu gi donda tama do to chen nga chu gi so so gi 저 지르sem전 탐제 지단의 란신기 거나 즉 동al 미디어보다 대원대 봐 임바 먼저기 즉 서로 용건지 미 간사도 오지네 하고 거기 심전 도르신 바이나 즉 먼저기 하고 거다 즉 콜라 즉 잠보체와이나 즉 가오 남주대하다 즉 잠보 마제와이나 즉 남주 로바테 바이나 때라니 거의 남주량 즉 냠바테 하다 근데 콘솔라 유티서 심전 여바 지바르 되나 당한소 근데 미 겨와 딜 때는 간소 가래이나 즉 야고 장하기 고갑당 근데 여바 슈네 송고래 때나신 경한소 단다 간데 되지 나와이나 되게와 최종 간데 되지 나와이나 때 땐 즉 야고 졸라들 펜토그레스
Whatever practice that we do in our daily life as a practitioner, what we consider as dharmic practices is basically, in essence, what we are doing through our practices, trying to transform, trying to train, trying to, tame our mind. So, it's very much about training, transforming, or cultivation and develop of the mind. Such as we are trying to kind of, bring our mind from the state of ignorance to the knowledge, from the state of distorted, mistaken to the valid, correct understanding. So that's what we are trying to do, when we are doing practice, bring our mind towards knowledge, understanding, cultivation. And this applies, the innate kind of such desire of always wanting happiness, goodness, and not wanting suffering, even the slightest, exists even in the animal, in the mind of animal. We know from how we treat them, when we treat them nicely, they express, joy, and when we treat them badly, likewise they kind of respond. And obviously, as a human, as we know from the scriptures, that we have this special, opportunity as well as capacity, and therefore, in our practice, we are trying to move towards kind of, better or virtuous or higher kind of, state. And for that, certainly the understanding of the more understanding or the deeper understanding of the consciousness is always, helpful and beneficial. Any other questions?
How might that relate to dealing with afflictive emotions?
근데 녀몬의 제가 가려 그랬어. 근데 셈셈주나 레이로. 녀몬의 제가 가려 그랬어. 셈다 디고라. 셰베 거든 녀몬 셰바 디고 장해 줘라. 근데 녀몬의 가려 줘요래도.
Tati wala chi shela ligro ang
Zhe,
kiti chiga tamya yanda te kuso tu mashuro.
He's saying that, again, it will come later in the mental factors, so within the, again, if you come back, in the twofold division, the last one, right? Mind and mental factors. And within the mental factors, there are again sets of 52 mental factors most commonly accepted, and within that we will find 6 root afflictions, 20 secondary afflictions, and then we go each and every kind of afflictions. What are their nature, function? What does it so actually it is about when we are learning about consciousness, we are learning about afflictions. 그거 셰바 거 정대서 물론 요몽 걸 맞아 안 저러. 요몽도 셰바 공도 싫어. So when we are learning consciousness, I mean, there's no way to avoid afflictions. Affliction is the part of our consciousness. Any other questions?
Teaching, which will be on Sunday. So the next chapter.
중마들 화시시 중마들 고속시로 드리려 말아 다르다.
딘 맞는데.
단들 맞.
다른 더 쇼라.
중마들들아. So yeah, next class we will continue from sense consciousness and sense consciousness versus mental consciousness.
와다 또벤 주문 딘데 또 개인하다. 딘이 디버다.
저는 가지 디버도 맛이 되주 수행 말이야. 되주 거는 맞다 보고.
네네 디버도 뭐 드세요 말아.
The cousin 되주 시중이나 디 사와처리. 내가 삼아서. According to our plan, we are supposed to cover this part today, right? If you look at the sense and mental. But I guess
this is and good teaching
the care mother kebayo marma.
and good teaching the and I the candidate told us and I'm a woman was it teacher on the
yeah, so this can push this to the next class. Sure.
Saturdays at 1:45 p.m. in the months of May and June.
그런 거 주주도 교단 거라.
야야야.
근데 사변발이 있다고 그랬다. 진다 진행하고도 싶고 봐.
그래서 이게
Study group.
Any other questions or maybe suggestions or comments?
Suggestion, comment, then drilling is
discussions. Geshe said is helpful. It's good.
Maybe some topics to specifically meditate on as we go through this class. I think that would be very helpful. If he could describe some aspect of what we're studying to focus on during our meditations in our personal meditation.
그래서 또 검제 줘라고 하나서 검대 냠랜디나 렌데 데이도 딘데 콜은 검제 앞티시네 야고를 스타지션 클럽전에 저와 교교 라메로서 뭐 이게 딘데 람도 치도네 야고도사 데이콜 검제 앞티칼로 데이콜 검제라 줘
예쇼라 삼라타네 양결로 직 가레딘데 직 그냥 직 디레 삼로기 직 중앙이나 있는 게 뒤쳐보세요.
맞습니다.
지단에 컨트롤링은 망보지 티사도 딜라바베 지기요. 근데 연대 신교다 다 지금 라마초바는 좋지도. 지단에 컨트롤 라마초바다 되는 지금이나.
요 라마초바다 가서 인지도 나셔도 되겠다. So 컨트롤 인지도 초초 배 차선 된 거. So he's just saying that he will think about that and will come up with ideas, and he was saying that in general, many of you are already familiar with many texts that you have studied earlier, such as Foundation of All Good Knowledge, as well as the Guru Puja. He was asking about that, and I was informing him that you all are reciting it fluently in English as well as in Tibetan, using a prayer book. So this soak offering to do.
다성이 지단이 가지 그들 사갈다와는 디 소지볼 근데 이제 지단에 다 gengi 계획생년 남에도 저 남경원조라 다 자베나 자베 TV 갖고 있나래 지단에 순주 나와 가서 있나래 단당한 저기 저기 지단에 딱 소소 간데 소소소 양 테모 많이 바기 나야 요데 직 당한주 기단다 주기도 오시 찾아와는 직 라몬체 바디 직 차젠도 된투바이나 야보 요레스 다 지단에 디기에는 삼로단데 담마도에나 담봉을 직 가로치도 대양교 셀라에는 삼로다다 된소 나토바이나 직 야보 요사레스 지단에 차젠도 디긴도 가샤den기 페나가 나저도 오시 바이나 직 다한 남견이 직 samskap kawla samlo tangi tuse rago re te kap kala marawa ina nima niregi ene shadwe na la tende tu chigi yes
Um, so Guru Puja, practice, soul offering practice, Krishna said we will be doing that in this month of Sagadawa. And generally in Geshe's tradition, Lama Chopa offering the prayer is done in kind of, on a regular basis. And you can also kind of go through the text first, and then later use that text as a basis for your contemplation or for your meditation. So in Geshe case, he said that's part of his daily practices in his tradition, and sometimes get enough time, sometimes don't get, but in daily kind of practices they have they use Lama Chopa prayer and use that as a part of daily practices.
지단에 딱
그래.
지단은 코난조이나 리티트 오더니 망부난게 더 빼는 직사 미세마이나데 마네베미나데 소소낭라 텐데 난게 요는 직딜라바베 세도자 티직도 제와이나 하마델라이니 직토도 텐데 직 되균동 안서 텐데 스텐샤고 되나 담텐데 나이 갑소라 양직 소르드 잠발라이나 망부 시우다고 말다 직 비스쿠트 오치다 텐데 직 소게 제도 다 숨고라야 비스쿠트 소 소셔나 소상스 텐데 직직제 텐데 데데 다티나 차벤 요나신 데데 된샤바이나 디야야고 있어서 타마델라 투사비쇼라 페나리티도 티직 제바이네 티직 소삼다 가레도 티 제바이네 삼대 님바도 데데 데베 갑소라 데데 옛나바기 데데 숨고도.
So in his tradition as well, his teacher used to advise or instruct doing especially Guru Puja practice at the end of if you have done mini retreat, the retreat of like Tsongkhapa's prayer, Mikseba, as well as if you are just residing, accumulating mantras like a mantra of compassion, say 10,000, and after at the end of that, then you do Guru Puja practice with the small kind of soak offering, and that kind of that helps because soak in itself usually kind of by itself we won't do kind of over and over, but doing at the end of any retreat, mini retreat would be because you were saying that's a tradition, and you can do by that yourself as well. Any other? Any other things to share? Ask.
요새마로 메시게 다다
예시를 개선해 왜?
다 미세게
너무 중요할 수도 있다. 그거 뭐
스타데
무엇이 시대 팀 대신에 그 것도 샤네가 되게 되게 끝나네.
다치와면은 뭐가 됐죠? 뭐가 됐지? 얘네 에셀룰러 주는슈 가면 나네 데셀룰러 주는슈 지단에 알레다 디셔마 데로다 지단에 건조 내가 레게나 요거데다 내가 맨에 요거데나 다 지단 사니마라 콘센데 다 Dende chine da chik dende la tuna na wa dende che wadi ya bo re she so yana shu ge yes de chik shuna
Yes.
da ne te she la da chik khapta shama ya go ya da dende da chik ne la be ra me do dende chik shu shana.
So we'll stop here for today and do the dedication. And you were saying, being Sunday your holiday and coming to class and spending time here, study, he appreciate that.
Kidane nganso gompa do shen ba na lobjong che de be ring de la chik da wa chik do dende chik khatu chik so do ta dende le do de go ya dende yor dende kapsula ta nganso gi chik sal da wa nganso le sal da wa la zere ti kong sen ba da go she la ne chik lobjong cha sa shu la ya chik de wa na sal da wa khatu yong ge ya da di wa de ha ko mi da de da chik le ga le de ken chin ba ne chik ti kong sen de ya ti chik ke chen bo re ya le da de.
So if you are kind of, working throughout the weekdays continuously, then you become sort of very much aware of your holiday, and you kind of look forward to it. And like I was saying, in the monastery as well, this Monday is a holiday, so they'll look forward to that and wait, and then kind of make holiday a holiday. But here, like I was saying, you sort of sacrifice and coming to the class and spending time here learning. So he kind of appreciate that.
Well, Geshe, I can't tell you how much we appreciate it.
To this.
Yeah. It's not a sacrifice.
Yeah. That's all.
Okay, I'll do dedication then.
O chanchu senchu rinpo che ma ye pa na ma ye ju ke wa nyamba me pa yang kone gondo pe wa re sho are rave ko ve shengan de pendan de wa ma le chung we chere se wa tenzin kya so ye ja pe te de ba do den ju ro che ja ba pa ye che dara jen ba dang kun do sang bo te yang de shen Teta kunji jeso dalo je gewa dida tamje rabdu ngo. Tisuma chebe yawa tamje ge ngo kangla chodo nga ba. Taki gewe sawa di kun yang sambo je je rabdu ngo regi.
In English.
Spiritual Bodhi that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which is arisen not diminish, but increase more and more.
No.
In the land encircled by snow mountains, the source of all happiness and benefits, those who person generously and in their heart. His judgments and systems of ways. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri attain omniscience and Samandava to true. So on how to educate these merits to train and follow in the footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future, praise educationists. So I too dedicate these sources of my merit to all beings to perfect good actions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hmm?